I never thought my old past as a Navy SEAL would come back to life. My life was running completely normal, calm, and predictable. But one day, 3 strangers showed up at our door, and everything changed. That day, I was in the garage putting away some tools while Alexa was outside watering the plants. Everything seemed like any other ordinary afternoon. The neighborhood was quiet, the sun warm, and nothing hinted at the storm about to arrive. Then, without warning, a black SUV pulled up in front of our house. 3 men stepped out in perfect sync. They all looked the same: black jackets, dark sunglasses, and fake-looking badges pinned on their chests. It was a costume more than a uniform, an imitation meant to deceive. They walked toward us with a heavy, intentional stride. One of them barked out loudly, "HOA compliance inspection!" Alexa didn't flinch. Calm but firm, she responded. "This is private property. You are not allowed inside." From the garage window, I studied them carefully. Training and instinct kicked in immediately. In one glance, I knew they weren't legitimate. They had no radios, no standard gear, and even their props looked like toys from a discount store. But what stood out more than their fake appearance was their arrogance. They thought intimidation would be enough, Sarah warned them again. But instead of retreating, they pressed forward. That was when one of them lashed out, knocking her phone to the ground and striking her across the face. That act ended any hesitation in me. I stepped out of the garage and into their path. My voice was low but sharp as steel. "You just made a big mistake coming here." They laughed at me, mocking, assuming I was just another ordinary man. One of them pulled out fake handcuffs, trying to act the part of law enforcement. I moved quickly, grabbed his wrist, twisted it until he collapsed onto the ground, unable to move. The second man lunged with a baton, but he was clumsy. I caught his arm mid-swing, turned his momentum against him, and drove him into the pavement. His groans filled the air. Only their leader remained. His false confidence cracked as he yelled out accusations of me attacking the police. I looked at him with complete certainty and told him what he refused to admit. This wasn't law, this was crime. Behind me, Alexa recovered her phone and began recording. Her voice carried across the yard as she announced loudly that the sheriff had already been called. The leader's bravado faded. He started backing away, but I grabbed his jacket and slammed him against his own SUV. The horn blared, echoing through the neighborhood. By now, curious neighbors had gathered. Drawn by the commotion, the real police arrived within minutes, sirens cutting through the chaos. They saw the scene for what it was. Sarah immediately handed over her recording, which captured everything clearly. There was no debate. The 3 men were arrested on the spot. Day was far more revealing than the confrontation itself. At the station, Alex and I gave our statements in detail. We explained how the men had introduced themselves, how they had forced their way onto the property, and how they had physically assaulted her. The officers listened carefully, but they didn't look surprised. They had likely seen impersonators before, but the violence and boldness in this case made it more than a simple scam. When the suspects were questioned separately, inconsistencies appeared in their stories almost immediately. They tried to maintain the lie of being part of some compliance inspection team, but their fabricated details fell apart. None of them had identification, none could provide legitimate paperwork, and their so-called badges turned out to be cheaply printed cards. Eventually, one of them admitted that they were not acting independently. They had been hired. That admission cracked open the entire case. The investigation moved quickly. Within days, evidence surfaced that pointed directly to the president of our homeowners association. He had arranged for these men to come to our property, not to enforce any rules, but to intimidate us into paying fees that had no legal basis. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he had used such tactics. The authorities discovered that he had a pattern of harassment toward residents who resisted his authority. In the past, neighbors had complained of suspicious fines, threats, of lines, and even subtle acts of retaliation, like property damage or anonymous letters. This time, however, he had crossed a line too visible to ignore. Not only had his hired men assaulted a resident, but the entire event had been recorded from start to finish. Alexa, quick thinking to pick up her phone, became the cornerstone of the case. The video captured not just the physical violence, but also the imposters' claims, their aggressive behavior, and the way they were exposed once real law enforcement arrived. That evidence left no room for manipulation or denial. When the case reached the courtroom, it unfolded with unusual clarity. The prosecution presented the video, our testimony, and the police reports. The defense attempted to argue that the men were simply misguided contractors, but their past records and the details of the arrangement with the HOA president proved otherwise. The charges of assault, impersonation, and conspiracy were undeniable. The HOA president himself faced even harsher scrutiny. Financial records revealed that he had misused community funds and imposed unlawful fees on multiple households. Several neighbors came forward with their own stories, describing how they had been coerced into paying or had been threatened with legal action when they refused. Until now, many of them had believed they were alone in their experiences. Seeing him exposed in court gave them the courage to speak up. The judge's ruling was decisive. The imposters received sentences for their direct crimes, while the HOA president was fined heavily, removed from his position, and barred from serving in any similar role in the future. The community he had controlled through fear was suddenly free from his grip. The ripple effects of the case spread across our neighborhood. People who had once avoided involvement now began attending meetings. Transparency became a priority, with new leadership insisting on open records and fair practices. For the first time in years, residents felt that the HOA was accountable to them, rather than the other way around. For Alexa and me, the ordeal left lasting impressions. The confrontation had been dangerous, but it reminded me that the skills I had once relied on were not gone. They were a part of me, and when the situation demanded it, they surfaced naturally. At the same time, the incident reinforced Sarah's strength. Her calmness, her insistence on recording, and her presence of mind had been just as crucial as my actions. Together, we had faced something meant to intimidate us, and instead, we exposed the truth. Walking out of the courthouse after the verdict, we felt a sense of closure. The threat that had come to our doorstep was no longer hanging over us. But more than that, we felt pride in knowing that our stand had changed something larger than ourselves. Neighbors were no longer silent, and the atmosphere in our community had shifted from fear to vigilance. In the end, what had begun as a moment of violence became a turning point. The imposters and the man who hired them had believed they could manipulate and control us. Instead, they revealed their own weakness. The plan to break us only ended up breaking them, and in the process, it gave strength to an entire neighborhood.